It's always a pleasure having you on Africa 24. For today's interview, we'll be receiving Mr. Antonio Pedro. He's the acting Executive Secretary of the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa. We'll be receiving him on the sidelines of the 30th Afreximbank annual meetings here in Accra. Thank you for joining us, sir.
Thank you very much
for being with us today.
Creating me this opportunity to speak to Africa 24.
Afreximbank, 30 years of existence. How do you appreciate the efforts of the bank, and what can you say about its progress in helping create opportunities for Africans?
Yeah, let me use this platform to once again to congratulate Afreximbank for its contribution to making Africa a much better investment destination by investing in de-risking investments on the continent through the establishment of special economic zones. We are able to attract investors from within and from outside Africa in very strategic sectors for Africa's socio-economic transformation. They've equally they've played an important role during COVID-19 to enable Africa to access essential products such as vaccines, and of course, more recently, as a result of the Ukraine war, facilitating access to grains and fertilizers. This is important because otherwise, without AVAT and ATEX, Africa would have not been able to be at the marketplace and get products at scale at the right kinds of prices. So that's an important contribution. Related to the theme of this particular conference, the role of Afreximbank in accelerating the implementation of the African continental free trade area is equally commendable by, for example, providing the payment systems that will enable us to trade amongst ourselves utilizing our own currencies. This is significant in view of the fact that we have multiple currencies here, which otherwise, without the platforms, would have required for us to utilize foreign currencies such as the dollars. And I could go on in enumerating their contribution. One which we are particularly proud of as part of our effort to enable Africa to go up in the value chain is the work that we are doing together with Afreximbank as well as other African multilateral development banks in helping the continent to go up in the battery and electric value chain. A value chain that will be about $46 trillion by 2050 on the strength of the massive deployment of renewable energy, as well as, of course, electric vehicles on the continent. This is important.
Intra-African trade figures still remain very low, despite all energy channeled towards boosting and accelerating intra-African trade. Can you tell us what is not going wrong, and can you give us some recommendations on what your department at the United Nations is doing to be able to stimulate intra-African trade? Well,
this is a structural problem that is clearly linked with the pattern and the economic tissue that we've inherited from the colonial period, in which our countries invariably were resource-driven export countries, exporting raw materials to the rest of the world and to the metropolis. And that, of course, dictated the kind of infrastructure that was established, which was basically aimed at linking the hinterland to the ports in the coast to export raw materials. So this constitutes an important barrier to intra-African trade. And equally so, the fact that we are basically all of us exporting more or less, or producing and exporting more or less the same products. So the opportunities to expand or increase or deepen product complementarity between our economies are still in an infant stage. That's why the figures of intra-African trade are still low compared to the rest of the continent. We are in between 18, 20, whilst the rest of the planet is in its 60s, 70s. So this is the opportunity. However, there is hope, and the hope is in the fact that we have now about 30 or so national CFTA strategies which were designed and formulated with a view to making sure that the African continental free trade area benefits everyone by first understanding what are the comparative advantage of all of those countries that we will be trading under the CFTA regime. What is it that differentiates them, which will then create the opportunity for us to specialize those countries in one specific area of opportunity that will then enhance that product complementarity. For example, Central Africa, amongst all the regions, is one where the levels of intra-African trade are the lowest, 3% or so. And that is because of the factors that I've enumerated earlier. The ECA has been first supporting our countries with the formulation of the national CFTA strategies. Now, together with the AFCFTA Secretariat and the African Union in general, we are working in the implementation of those strategies by, again, consolidating knowledge and about what constitutes the opportunities through growth diagnostic studies and identifying, again, what are the barriers to trade. So the barriers are not only as, tariffs, are also non-tariff barriers. And with the CFTA, the effort is designed with a view to ensuring that the non-tariff barriers are eliminated by of course, also investing in ensuring that there is a better link between our countries. So the infrastructure barriers are important. We've done a study, for example, in Cameroon, which has demonstrated that whilst Nigeria is trade proximate, DRC is very, very distant, much more distant than, for example, trading with China and India, which are thousands of kilometers away. So this clearly, if Cameroon wants to explore the opportunity of exporting to DRC, which is an important market, now about 100 or so million people, that will go to 300 or so between now and 300 and 250. It means that it has to make itself much more trade proximate to DRC. So those are those kinds of issues that we have to overcome.
We cannot do this intra-Africa trade without boosting industrialization of the continent. Can you tell us some of the challenges that are still faced in the industrial sector in Africa?
Well, industrialization is absolutely key and central for the implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. I always say that industrial and trade policy are part and parcel of the same continuum. So what do we need to do on that front? First is to really recognize that industrialization or industrial policy is the business of the entire government. So, and we need to center stage, therefore, the industrial policies in the work of our governments, bringing in all the relevant institutions that can play that role. Why so? Because one of the major problems for us to be where we are in terms of our localization in the value chains is competitiveness. And competitiveness can be accelerated or improved if we invest more in science, technology, innovation. It means that the ministers of education and ministers of higher education should be part and parcel of any effort to industrialize our countries. So that's an important part. The second is really about addressing some of the critical challenges associated with industrialization. Access to energy, so that the cost profile of our industries is competitive. So we need to look at how to provide reliable, cheap and efficient energy. We need to ensure that we can have access to reliable raw materials and so on and so forth. It's a complement of factors in addition to, of course, improving the quality of our products so that we can then promote made in Central Africa, produce and consume locally. In Cameroon, they call it patriotisme économique.
There are many restrictions to intra-African trade on the African continent, particularly the establishment of visa-free regimes. Can you tell us what is making African governments to be so reluctant in adopting visa-free regimes? We've seen in West Africa, it's already the case where one West African citizen can go to the next world. What is stopping other Africans from imitating that example and
well,
building?
Some of the arguments out there are that, free movement of people would deteriorate security. And what we argue is that, let's certainly engage on this particular subject. What are the security issues that our member states are concerned with? What kind of cooperation between the law and order institutions in our particular spaces need to be strengthened so that you profile what could potentially be those criminals that will utilize the visa-free space to circulate around, and then demonstrate the benefits of free movement and goods, and of people, goods and services, which will certainly reduce the costs of factor flows that will make our region much more competitive. This is an important agenda in our efforts to accelerate the implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area. It is important that all of those protocols that are formulated and adopted at the Addis Ababa level, at the continental level, are ratified, and second, that they are domesticated in national laws and regulations, namely harmonizing those national laws, regulations with the relevant protocols. In February, we've just adopted the African Union adopted three very important protocols. The protocols on intellectual property, the protocols on competition, and the protocols on investments. Those are key protocols for us to be able to have an Africa that is competitive, an Africa that trades amongst itself, and so on. So this is what we believe it should be their priorities. I would like to bring to the viewers' attention that COVID-19 has created an important opportunity for us to recalibrate our entire development agenda by looking more inward. One concept that I would say became popular during COVID is what they call near-shoring, which was essentially an argument about producing and having value chains and supply chains that are closer to our countries, so that we will reduce our exposure to external shocks. Another concept was, of course, friendshoring, which is a little bit a response to the geopolitical tensions that we have. We've been arguing that it's important now to talk about Afri-shoring, about Africa creating supply chains that can reduce our own vulnerabilities to external shocks. The African Continental Free Trade Area provides the catalyst for that, for us to trade more among ourselves. I mean, our discussions earlier about the importance of increasing the levels of intra-African trade. So these are some of the important aspects of the way forward.
Over the years, Africa has been relying increasingly on food imports, with the bills now exceeding $50 billion annually, according to estimates.
Yes.
What are the consequences of increased reliance on imports?
Well, I mean, it's really about the vulnerabilities. Well, just look at what happened when we could not have access to Ukraine and Russian grains and fertilizers. People, I mean, the cost of living went up, access to food security reduced, whilst at the same time we have the opportunities on the continent to be able to feed ourselves. We have some of the largest Arab untouched areas in the world. We have very good areas with access to land, to water. So we should certainly invest locally. Fortunately, as part of the African Union strategies, this is a priority area to strengthen our agriculture and food systems by creating agri-poles, agri-economic zones, and so on. This is absolutely important for us to be able to reduce that dependence. Dependence has implications vulnerabilities can be increased, our insecurities, including food insecurity, would increase. So it is important that we feed ourselves, and this is part of the high fives, as you know, from the African Development Bank, is a part of our priorities as well. We as ECA are working with our member states. One example is the work that we are doing with Zimbabwe and Zambia to create a transboundary agri sort of special economic zone by utilizing the endowments to position them as breadbaskets of that particular region. Yeah.
Thank you so much, sir, for answering our questions. Thank you, Mr. Antonio Pedro. You are the Acting Executive Secretary of the ECA, Economic Commission of Africa. Thank you for always being with us on Africa 24.
Pleasure.
Thank you for watching us. We've come to the end of this interview. Stay tuned for more news on Africa 24.